So another event that is happening at the DNC convention is Kshama Sawant, Jill Stein, and Nick Cruz have gotten together and they're giving speeches. They have their own protest event that's going on as well. I want to go ahead and bring in Nick for his speech. I got to tell you, I am so proud of Nick. I feel like those of us at RBN, we've really come a long way. And for those of you who don't know this, Nick is one of the co-founders of RBN, which originally was Fred Hampton Leftist, and we changed the name to Revolutionary Blackout Network. In the very beginning, the goal was to get us on the ground. That was always the goal. It wasn't just for us to do a podcast and sit here in front of a camera. The goal was always about the outreach and all of those things. And we were basically using our activism and putting that on a podcast. But in the end, we know the ultimate goal was to get on the ground. And here we are 3 years later, and we're seeing a lot of these things play out in real time. And Nick, I feel like, has really come a long way. And I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of him. So now we're going into Nick's speech here with Workers Strike Back, Kshama Sawant, and Jill Stein.
If genocide is not a deal breaker for you, there's something wrong with you. Any party that doesn't draw a red line at genocide is a party that does not deserve to exist. We have Holocaust Harris, Kamala Harris. They didn't remove Joe Biden as the lead nominee for president because he facilitated a genocide. They removed him because he had a bad debate. My name is Nick Cruz of Revolutionary Blackout. My goal is to create a coalition of workers, anti-imperialists, to destroy the two-party duopoly. Calling it two-party duopoly is kind of misleading. It's a uniparty of war and genocide. We must challenge the Democratic Party. They are, like my late great mentor Glenn Ford said, the most effective evil. And there are progressives and liberals that will say nonsense to you because their job is to confuse the workers. They will say some nonsense to you and want you to believe it. They will tell you got to vote for Killer Kamala because somehow Donald Trump is worse. Let's analyze the record of genocide Joe Biden. If you're one of the people who believe that Donald Trump will be worse than Joe Biden, you are engaging in genocide denial. You have to tell yourself that Donald Trump is worse because you have to reconcile with the fact that you voted and enabled a gross evil on humanity.
100%. And this needs to be heard and this needs to be said. I don't see how anybody can back a party that is guilty with genocide. And for the people who come to me and say, but you'll get Donald Trump. We've already had Donald Trump. There is always going to be a Donald Trump. Do people understand this? What people have to understand is I've lived in places before Donald Trump even ran for president. I didn't always live in a blue state. I didn't always live in Massachusetts. I lived in red states. And what people have to understand, the things that they heard Donald Trump say, those things were not shocking and new to me because I heard people make those statements before. Some of you live in a bubble. And some of you have never gotten out of that bubble. And especially here, when I came to Massachusetts, I was like, some of y'all ain't really. I can tell some of you never been around anybody except for the people in your blue town. So they were really shocked to hear some of the rhetoric that came from Donald Trump. I was not, because I've heard people say even worse. But I don't understand this at all. Like, if genocide is not a red line for you, I'm very deeply concerned about the future of this country and where we are supposed to go. Very concerned.
Do you guys know who Lily Greenberg Call is? She was the first Jewish appointee in the Biden administration who resigned because she explained that there was a culture of racism in the Biden administration against the Palestinians. You had record amounts of federal employees and Biden appointees that resigned for the same reason. You want to know who didn't resign? Killer Kamala Harris. She didn't resign because she had moral quandaries with the racism of the Palestinian people. To explain why saying that Trump is worse than Biden is genocide now, let me explain to you guys the actions that the Biden administration has taken. You had a giant debate in Israel right now. There was almost a civil war because there was debating whether the IDF has the right to rape Palestinian prisoners to death. And spoiler alert, the pro-rape crowd won. There was a mob of Israelis that stormed where the soldiers who committed mass rape and sodomized a man to death, and they demanded him to be released, and the government said no problem. The position of the Biden administration when approached with this information was, we will allow Israel to investigate themselves. How would Donald Trump handle that? The same way. You had Joe Biden, who is giving Israel diplomatic immunity during this war. Do you guys know who the legend Aaron Bushnell is? Rest in peace. Aaron Bushnell is a martyr who did not want to be complicit with genocide, so he self-immolated because the Biden administration gave the orders of the Air Force to help Israel with targeting in their genocide. Did the media tell you that? Aaron Bushnell's death is directly on the hands of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Hope you guys understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Genocide Joe Biden and Holocaust Harris enables terrorism in the West Bank. You had an Israeli terrorist unit, they call them military, they're terrorist units that engaged, and they recently murdered an elderly Palestinian in their own home. In the light of this news, because it was bad publicity, you had the Biden administration that said we may put sanctions on the terrorist units employed by the Israeli military. And man, the media liked that one. The liberal media ran with that for weeks. And what we told you guys on RBN is when I saw the word may, I immediately became skeptical. So it was announced last week that Biden will not sanction the IDF units that are committing terrorism in the West Bank. Not only that, they're going to continue the weapons that go to them. So explain to me how Donald Trump would be worse knowing these facts.
This is the part a lot of people just don't want to hear. A lot of people just feel like, again, because they're relying on their political parties, right? Like, and a lot of people have Trump derangement syndrome. It is what it is. And what I'm trying to tell you guys is that even when Donald Trump, this is all over with, right? Because obviously Donald Trump is not going to run for president again. Even when this is all over with, there will always be a Trump. There will always be opposition to the Democratic Party. And what I think a lot of things have happened, and I say this living in a blue state, is that I think a lot of liberals have convinced themselves that as long as it's not the Republicans, it's going to be good. Now, they're saying this during a time where the economy has been bad. We've had inflation. I always lead with the economy because a lot of people know what's going on with their wallet. Okay. The economy has been bad. We've had this inflation. We've had the war started with Russia and Ukraine. We have a genocide happening in Gaza, not to mention the IDF and Israeli settlers have been ramping up settlements in the West Bank. They announced they're doing this mass expansion of settlements in the West Bank. Where is Black wealth now, right now in this country? Because I know some of you only want to hear about the domestic stuff. Where is that at right now? We're still at the bottom. Still at the bottom. There have been a number of people that have come onto this show that have complained that their mayors have received no help from the Biden administration after asking for help with migrants that have come into their cities in low-income Black neighborhoods. And they haven't received any help from the Biden administration. My governor also said the same thing, Governor Healy, right? But a lot of the elite liberals will tell you it's still better than Republicans, so we're just going to deal with what we can deal with. But see, they can afford to. They're not affected. Especially by a lot of things I just told you, they're not affected. And with all of the academics that is in this area, particularly in the Boston area, and a lot of people are highly educated. And with all of that education, a lot of them cannot wake up to the fact that both of these parties are corporate controlled. Both of these parties support the military industrial complex. Both of these parties support and defend the billionaire class, regardless of what type of rhetoric they say, their policies say differently. All of these faculty members, all these people here with PhDs and they can't figure that out. Too much derangement syndrome.
We have to be clear to the working class. There are two wings of the imperial machine, and we must form a coalition to destroy them. You have Bernie Sanders and AOC. Did you guys see AOC last night? So I guess their game plan is to lie. I guess no one knows what the word ceasefire means anymore. Joe Biden said there was going to be a ceasefire the second Monday of February. What month are we in? Kamala Harris called for a temporary ceasefire so the IDF can take a break and get some snacks in between killing Palestinians. And you got people that have the nerve to tell me that she's calling for a ceasefire. Words have meaning. Please learn them, please.
It's like I said before. I mean, it's kind of like if I know that you tell me that you're going on a diet, but I keep giving you large pizzas and you keep eating it all. It's the same like mentality here. It's like, again, if you're calling for a ceasefire, why are you still giving them weapons? Because they're not calling for no damn ceasefire. That is just campaign rhetoric to get the protesters to quiet down. That is campaign rhetoric to get you to just vote for them anyway. Because people are like, why don't you say this about Trump? Because Trump has already told you explicitly what he plans to do. He's not calling for a ceasefire. He's not telling you, yeah, privately, we're going to, stop sending weapons to Israel. He's not saying those things. He's overt about, no, this is what we're going to do. I'm telling you about what Kamala and Biden are doing because they're trying to pretend like they're not going to do the same thing, but they are. They're lying to you. And you need to know that.
Kamala Harris, if you go to her website, has no policies. Doesn't really matter if she did. I know when I looked at Biden's website, he had a public option on his website. Do we got a public option? Last time I checked, Joe Biden was supposed to send me a $2,000 check in the mail. What happened? So, do not believe anyone who will tell you anything a politician will tell you and promise you. We are grown adults. Politicians are not going to do anything for the working class. Do not pay attention to the policy platform. Do you guys know what you should pay attention to? Who they are hiring. I warned people about Genocide Joe, and I warned the Bernie Sanders left not to fall in line behind Joe Biden because his advisor was Anthony Blinken. His foreign policy advisor was Anthony Blinken, and you guys surprised he started a genocide?
Yep.
So you want to know who the economic advisor for Kamala Harris is? Kamala Harris hired the same BlackRock economic advisor that was just in the Joe Biden administration. They said, well, if you vote for a third party, you're wasting your vote. You're giving your vote to BlackRock every election.
Yep.
Then you winning something.
The same BlackRock that's buying up single family homes, which is part of the reason why you can't get one or you can't afford to get one. The same BlackRock that bought those foreclosed homes from the '08 housing crisis. Those homes that were taken from people, predominantly Black people. That BlackRock, that's who she added to her economic platform.
Don't listen to the platform. Look at who they hire. You want to know who directly funds and benefit from the genocide in Gaza? BlackRock. You want to know who's licking their lips right now at Ukraine waiting to rebuild it? BlackRock. So why would anyone think Kamala Harris would end those things when she's hiring people from BlackRock?
There you go.
Bernie Sanders and AOC play a very particular role for the establishment. They're here to cultivate a dumb left, an anti-intellectual left who is filled with people who are political nihilists, who are defeatists. So the reason why they are supporting genocide Joe Biden, the reason why they don't care that they're going to get a public option, because they're so defeated. They are so nihilistic about the future that they believe the only chance that we have to get crumbs is to vote for people who commit genocide. So what social democrats and justice democrats do, they engage in a devil's bargain with the ruling class. They want to sell out Palestinians and the global working class out of the devil's bargain that we will get crumbs from the establishment when they don't do anything from us. They know exactly what they're doing. What we need to do is reject the political nihilism from the people who tell you we have no choice but to vote for genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Have my brother Rome here with me. The GOAT. We have RBN chapters in 5 cities all over the nation, and we are only 3 years old. Rome goes around feeding people, giving free haircuts, and organizing the community with scraps. Do you understand what Rome and RBN would do with $400 million that was wasted on the Bernie campaign? I'm begging the left to get serious. I am begging the left to get serious. It's almost a flaw of mine where I have almost too much revolutionary optimism. They're not going to defeat me until I'm in the dirt. And what we need to do, you need to figure out what you can do for this movement. I've been put in this very weird position in my life where I'm an educator, where I'm speaking to you guys right now. I guess this is what I do for the movement. But let's say you got stage fright and you can't do this. Let's say you're not someone like Rome who can engage in mutual aid. Let's say you're not someone who like Sabby Sabs, like Jane Fauntleroy. Let's say you're not like that. You do what you can for the movement. If you're good at baking pies, guess what you need to do when we have a march? Maybe
bake some damn pies. And this is the important part. You know, I know not everyone is an activist. We know not everyone is able to get on the ground, whether it's because of physical reasons or because of work-related reasons. Totally get that. But there's a place for everyone. Some of you are artistic. As you can see, Charlie is very artsy. I'm not. Okay, so I'm not the artist. But he can do his part making signs. You know, if you can cook your ass off, maybe you might want to cook for some of these events. Like there's a place for everyone, right? So I never want anyone to feel like, oh, I'm not as a great of a speaker, or I've never done activism before, so I can't get involved. I've never, marched out on the streets. I've never participated in protests, so I don't feel like this is a space for me. There's a space for everyone, and not everybody needs to be front and center, right?
Let me bake some pies. If you're good at sewing, I can't. Maybe you should make some shirts.
I can't either.
What you need to do, even if you work 60 hours a week, let's say you're doing well in your life, but you still care about the struggle. You work 60 hours a week, you got 3 kids, you don't have time. You know what you do? You fund Rome. You fund the mutual aid fighters. There's no revolution without class traders. We need y'all.
Yep.
So that's what my call is. On RBN, we laugh, we cry, make fun of the ruling class. But my main goal is to get people activated. I talk to people who live in China and Russia. I talk to people in the UK, Brazil. Last week, I had a Palestinian roundtable. And what people tell me, I always ask them the same question. What should people in America do to help you guys resist this empire? We need to look beyond borders and form an international coalition of anti-imperialism, because the war has already started.
Yep.
Dr. Jill Stein. How many presidential candidates was arrested in brutal fashion standing up against genocide? When I saw that, I was like, there it is. There it is. I am doing what I can for the movement. Jill Stein, in her professional capacity, is doing what she can do for this movement. But it's more than just being someone who wants to be a leader. She put her body on the line.
This is something I will say, too, when it comes to rhetoric versus action. It's one thing to say, okay, we need a ceasefire. Do you see any of those politicians that say we need a ceasefire out there in the streets protesting with the people? No. Where are all those people? Where are all those people that say we need a ceasefire? Kamala Harris said, I don't see Kamala Harris at any of these rallies, any of these protests, giving any type of speech or anything. That would be based. That would be based. She doesn't even want to go out there and talk to the people. Why would you not do that? I don't see them speaking at these events. And I don't want to hear like, oh, they don't want to be around the violence. No, I'm talking about all of these events, whether they're indoor or outdoor. You see Jill Stein, you see Claudia de la Cruz, you see Cornel West. You sure as hell don't see RFK at these events. And we know why. But the people who are calling for a ceasefire, those politicians, you don't see them at any of these events because they don't mean it.
That's why I'm supportive of your campaign, but let's not rely too much on Jill Stein. Everyone has a role in this movement.
Yep.
Let's get activated. We need a revolution. Thank you, guys.
All right. Shout out there to my comrade Nick from RBN. Great speech there. And I love the way he ended that when he said that, we all can't just rely on Jill Stein. Again, Jill Stein, I've told you this before, is not a hero. Nobody is coming to save you. We have to save ourselves. So Jill Stein is just one piece of that puzzle, but there are other pieces such as mutual aid, organizing, community activism, protest, building an anti-imperialist movement. She's a small part A small part. So Kshama Sawant is now giving her speech at the worker strike back DNC protest as well. Let's go ahead and bring that in. Here we go.
Sisters, brothers, and siblings, it's very important and inspiring that thousands of people have come to Chicago this week to protest the Democratic National Convention, despite all the obstacles in front of working people and the anti-war movement, that we are not silently standing by as the Democrats carry out this genocidal war and all their attacks on workers. The Democratic elites say that Harris is somehow not complicit in the war, that she was not responsible for the Biden-Harris administration's betrayals of working people, that Harris and Walz represent a progressive change of course. This is the great lie that they are selling.
Yep. This is why they had to get someone else in, because they wanted to bring her in because they're like, well, people won't see her as complicit, right?
A few blocks from Chicago's Union Park, the Abandon Biden movement relaunched itself as Abandon Harris. Worker Strike Back and I were at the Abandon Harris press conference on Monday, yesterday, where we saw Arab and Muslim American leaders reject the great lie, reject the idea that their communities or other working people can support this warmongering candidate, Kamala Harris. Unfortunately, leadership that is willing to stand up to the Democrats is in exceedingly short supply right now. We have had an onslaught of misleadership led by the Democratic Party, but assisted by so-called left media figures and by labor movement leaders. This misleadership is having a disorienting impact on our movement. That is why we saw 5,000 people on the streets of Chicago yesterday and not 50,000 or 100,000 as was projected before the coronation of Harris.
Yes. So thank you, Kshama, so much for saying that. Once they changed the name to Kamala Harris instead of Joe Biden, not as many people decided to show up. She's 100% correct about that.
I'm not here just to give a rah-rah speech. I'm here to speak the truth. It was only a couple of months ago that the media, including the New York Times, were making comparisons to the protests at the DNC in 1968, which helped define a generation, when the Vietnam anti-war protest movement put its stamp on history in Chicago. Now, instead of feeling the pressure from our movement, corporate media and the Democrats are celebrating. The Christian Science Monitor ran a headline yesterday: "Forget 1968, the DNC is underway in Chicago with minimal disruption." Is this because Harris has taken a position on the genocidal war that is different from Biden's or Trump's? Of course not. Harris has repeatedly reaffirmed that she will continue to back the Israeli war machine to the hilt. She met with Netanyahu the day after he received 58 separate standing ovations from the US Congress.
Yep.
Harris's campaign has directly confirmed that she does not support an arms embargo. Indeed, since Harris became the nominee, another $23 billion have been appropriated for the Israeli military. Entire bloodlines are being wiped out in Gaza. Countless people, including children and babies, are losing limbs. Disease is spreading. The United Nations said last month that Israel's intentional and targeted starvation campaign has led to the spread of famine throughout the Gaza Strip. Gaza has been reduced to rubble. None of this would have been possible without Biden and Harris, the two warmongers in chief of US capitalism and imperialism. We can have no illusion that Trump or RFK Jr. would do anything different. Trump is a warmongering, anti-worker, billionaire con man. But Trump left the White House as the most unpopular president in US history. And yet, now there is a possibility he could return to power. And the only reason for that is because the Biden-Harris administration sold out the working class in every sense of the term.
The only way it even becomes that close when it's someone who was, the least popular president in history when they're leaving office and they decide to run again against someone who beat them and the polls are close. The only way that happens is if you really mess things up. And that was Joe Biden's presidency. Like, that's insane. Like, I remember saying to myself, like, when it was still Joe Biden in the race and I was looking at the polls and I was like, watching that interview with Joe Biden and listening to him saying that he didn't believe the polls, I was like, well, honey, you need to talk to people out on these streets. You need to talk to people on the streets because they were very much against. And that's another thing. They're not talking to people, to everyday people in the community. They're talking to corporate media pundits. They're talking to people that are within their class bubble. And they're talking to people that predominantly are in that DC area. They're not talking to the people that are struggling financially. They don't go outside of their comfort zone. This is one thing I'll give Bill Clinton credit for. And this is the only, this is something that Bill Clinton was actually good at. Bill Clinton was actually good at going to the everyday people in, whether it was a coffee shop, a mom and pop restaurant, McDonald's, Burger King. He was really good at just talking to the average everyday person. I mean, sitting down and talking to them. And something changed over the years where we got these politicians that for whatever reason, they closed themselves off from those people.
When they ran for office in 2020, both Biden and Harris said they supported the $15 an hour minimum wage. Biden said he would be the most pro-union president in history, and he still makes those claims. Harris said she supported Medicare for all. She said she opposed fracking. These promises, like much of Gaza, lie in rubble. They sold out the railroad workers. They abandoned 15 and even the healthcare public option. Working people face a deep cost of living crisis. The price of bread has gone up by 147%.
Yep.
There is historic credit card, medical, and student debt.
There are some things I have stopped purchasing from the grocery store, by the way, that I used to purchase.
Working people are facing war and climate catastrophe. Working people faced with all this, they look back at the last 4 years, its massive levels of inflation, the skyrocketing cost of fuel, housing, all of this, and also a majority of American people are calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. And they look at all of this, and for all of these reasons, millions of working people correctly so, want to vote against the status quo in some shape or form. But many of the labor leaders and the liberal and self-described left media are strongly encouraging people to think Harris is that change. But the cold, hard reality is that for the people of Gaza and for working people in the United States and around the world, Harris and Walz are just a change of deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yep.
And many working people do recognize this. Make no mistake, the Democratic Party is the best builder of Trumpism. It was the betrayals of Clinton that led to Bush and the Iraq War. It was the betrayals by Obama in bailing out Wall Street banks instead of workers in escalating the war in Afghanistan and abandoning single-payer healthcare that led to the right-wing Tea Party and then eventually Donald Trump. Last night at the Democratic National Convention, AOC sold and celebrated the great lie. She claimed that Harris was working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and bring the hostages home. That's a quote.
She sure did. And I also noticed that she didn't mention the word genocide anymore. Now it's working for a ceasefire and bringing the hostages home.
She called Trump a two-bit union buster and claimed that Harris, again, these are all quotes, Harris fights every single day to lift working people out from under the boots of greed, trampling on our way of life. Yes, Trump is a union buster and deeply hostile to workers and the union movement. But Harris was Biden's other half in blocking the railroad workers' strike, the most shameful act of union busting in decades.
You don't hear a lot of people talk about that anymore, the railroad workers. Like everyone wants to say, look at all these unions that support Joe Biden. By the way, unions are usually paid. They're usually paid to endorse someone. That's how this works. Just FYI. And usually a lot of times the rank and file members don't agree with the endorsement. I know I've interviewed them on the show. But all of a sudden, a lot of people forgot about what they did to the railroad workers.
Yes, don't forget East Palestine, Ohio. Absolutely. The CEOs of the big Harris's campaign donors are a who's who of the billionaire class. The CEOs of the big corporations, every single one of them a ruthless union buster, are said to be euphoric. Again, another quote, euphoric that Harris is the Democratic nominee. No, they are not being delusional. Big business understand that Harris is on their side. That is why they're euphoric. By peddling her breathtaking lies last night, AOC, the former self-described socialist and working class representative, is cementing her position to rise to the top of the most powerful party of the capitalist class in the world. Last night's DNC extravaganza also saw the president of the UAW, the Auto Workers Union, Shawn Fain, do his own share of spreading lies, calling Harris a fighter for working people. Fain is also one of the many labor leaders who have publicly called for a ceasefire and for an end to US military funding for the Israeli state, and then turned around and endorsed both Biden and Harris with no discussion or vote by the rank and file members of their unions.
That was a big disappointment. I agree with Kshama there, because he was out there in the streets marching with pro-Palestinian protesters, and then he gave over that endorsement. But again, like I said, a lot of times these unions are paid to endorse a candidate.
This type of sleight of hand is gravely damaging to working class organizing.
Uh-oh. Sorry, guys. Let me go back just a tad bit there.
The CEOs of the big Harris's campaign donors are a who's who of the billionaire class. The CEOs of the big corporations, every single one of them a ruthless union buster, are said to be euphoric. Again, another quote, euphoric that Harris is the Democratic nominee. No, they are not being delusional. Big business understand that Harris is on their side. That is why they're euphoric. By peddling her breathtaking lies last night, AOC, the former self-described socialist and working class representative, is cementing her position to rise to the top of the most powerful party of the capitalist class in the world. Last night's DNC extravaganza also saw the president of the UAW, the Auto Workers Union, Sean Fain, do his own share of spreading lies, calling Harris a fighter for working people. Fain is also one of the many labor leaders who have publicly called for a ceasefire and for an end to US military funding for the Israeli state, and then turned around and endorsed both Biden and Harris with no discussion or vote by the rank and file members of their unions. This type of sleight of hand is gravely damaging to working class organizing.
Oh, it did it again. Sorry. Let's see if it'll let me go forward. There we go.
If this had been done, the streets of Chicago would have looked very different.
Yep.
Harris and the Democrats would have been very afraid. And the potential for a big vote for Jill Stein to help lay the ground for a new mass party of the working class would have been far greater as well.
Yep.
It is that kind of threat, the threat of labor strikes, social upheaval, and millions of votes for Jill Stein that is needed to end the war on Gaza and to win real victories for working people. We should learn the lessons from the history of class struggle and social movements. The Vietnam War was ended by mass movements of working and young people. For the first time in history, US imperialism was forced to abandon a war. The war was started and escalated under Democrats. It was ended under Republican President Nixon, not because of his support, but despite him, because there were millions of people on the streets, a mass anti-war movement. There were mass social movements, the Black Power movement, the women's movement, the Latino movement. The soldiers themselves were organizing and refusing to fight. The labor movement carried out mass strikes in the 1970s that changed US history as well. That is what is needed right now. But we cannot disentangle the question of how to end the war and US military funding to Israel and winning workers' rights from the question of how to vote in November or from the Democratic Party. The problem is that as long as labor and other leaders promote the Democratic Party, the warmongering party of the billionaire class, it will continue to stymie and paralyze any steps forward. The Democratic Party is the graveyard for movements.
Yes, this is what people fully have to understand. We need a party for the workers. We need a worker party, not workers trying to work with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. We need a worker party, because you're not going to have legislation that is going to benefit the workers if your party is controlled by corporations. That's just the reality. So what they'll do is they'll give you a little bit of crumbs so you can say, oh, look at what they did, and they'll pat themselves on the back, but you're not getting what you deserve and you're not getting what you should. This is like what the wealthiest country in the world. And we don't have a living wage in this country. That makes absolutely no sense. Wealthiest country in the world, and we have homeless people on the street. The homeless population increased 25% under Joe Biden. Wealthiest country in the world. And I don't care what you say, because I've fed homeless people. So don't come to me and tell me that all those people are on drugs. That is not true. There are people who are homeless that have jobs. People who are homeless that have been evicted after the evicted moratorium ended. There are people who are homeless on the street with their kids. Wealthiest country in the world. And you'll go visit some other countries and you're looking for homeless people. You can't find them. The only way forward is we have to have something for the working class. We really do. Not that I want to make this, not the middle class, because I keep hearing all this about middle class, and DNC last night, they were like, Kamala grew up in a middle-class family. You guys keep talking about the middle class so that you don't have to talk about the working poor. You don't have to talk about the people that are working 2 jobs just to pay their rent. You don't have to talk about the people that work at Starbucks, the people who are working at Dunkin' Donuts, the people who are waiting tables. You don't have to talk about those people. I was that person. I was that person working 2 jobs. All of my money basically going to rent and bills. They didn't care about us then. They don't care about you now. I'm trying to tell you. But there are a lot of people in this country that are in that group where all they're doing is just working to try to keep up with the bills. What's the plan for those people? Why is it always, let's revitalize the middle class? Let's focus on the middle class. They don't care about people who are poor, and they don't care about people that are working poor.
If we are going to rebuild a fighting labor movement in the United States and a powerful enough anti-war movement to end the genocide, we are not going to do that by putting our illusions in the Democrats or the leaders who tell us we should trust the Democrats. We need to rebuild the militancy of the rank and file.
There you go.
That is why we launched Worker Strike Back. That is why we are using Worker Strike Back to help build the anti-war movement and to fight for the biggest possible anti-war, pro-worker vote in this election for Jill Stein. And that is why you should join Worker Strike Back if you haven't already.
I will say I spoke at I was a part of the Worker Strike Back announcement in Boston because they have chapters across the country. And this is something I warned people about back then. The same day that Kshama Sawant announced Worker Strike Back was the same day that Marianne Williamson announced her presidential campaign. And what I warned people about back then was that what's going to be around in the end after election season, what is still going to be here? Is that going to be Worker Strike Back? Or is it going to be Marianne Williamson's campaign? Because we knew, Marianne wasn't going to win. But the question is, what are you going to do after that? And there didn't seem to be a plan in reference to building some type of a movement if you do not win when it came to Marianne. And I watched all these people, and I warned people about this, donate money to that and promote that and not even mention Worker Strike Back, including a lot of people in left independent media, by the way, didn't even mention Worker Strike Back. All the people who were talking about, but labor, but the NLRB, all those people were talking about that when Worker Strike Back launched, didn't even mention it. Wasn't trending enough for them. So the question you have to ask yourself when you want to get involved in something that's supposed to be a movement, this is why you can't have a movement through a campaign. We saw what happened with Bernie, right? Once the election is over, what happens to the movement?
But we also need to be sober about what this week means for our movement going forward. The low turnout this week represents a setback. Unless we build a much stronger movement, the Democrats are going to lead many working people down a blind alley once again. We can't let that happen without a fight. So whether we win hundreds of thousands of votes for Jill Stein as the strongest anti-war pro-worker candidate, or we win millions of votes, regardless, we have to fight for every possible vote. I'm not using these kinds of numbers to be discouraging, but for our movement to have a real and honest assessment of where things are is crucial. The great lie, if it is not effectively countered by our movements, and even if we do everything right, is going to mislead many people, and many others who rejected will vote for Trump or not vote at all. Every vote for Jill Stein is a clear vote against the genocidal war, against the billionaire agenda, and every single one of those votes means something. Every vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, conversely, is a vote for genocidal war and the further undermining of the working class and our movements. Being real about assessing our movement's strengths and weaknesses does not mean, in any sense, being pessimistic. In fact, it guards against the demoralization that would be inevitable unless we developed an honest, scientific assessment of reality. We need to draw accurate conclusions and plan our next steps accordingly. If we may win 1 million votes for Jill Stein, that would be a victory in the context of the great lie. And rather than be discouraged, we should use that to take our movement forward. When we ran our first election in Seattle in 2012 for the Washington State House of Representatives, I received 9% of the vote on primary night. You're not mishearing me. It was 9% on primary night. We saw this as a real step forward, however, because we as socialists knew the obstacles of running a revolutionary socialist for elected office. We campaigned relentlessly, and that year we won 29% of the vote in November. And we saw that election as a building block. The following year, in 2013, we became the first socialist elected to the Seattle City Council in over 100 years. We won because we fought against the Democratic Party in Seattle, and we organized working people, not by me kissing up to the Democratic politicians.
That's right. Kshama Sawant, for those who don't know, she's a socialist, and she won not running through the Democratic Party in Seattle. She led the fight for 15 protests in Seattle, and they won. She fought back against Amazon, and they won. So she was very effective as a city councilor in Seattle. And she's not perfect, but she was very effective, and she was an outright socialist. Like, she didn't try to lessen the blow to people and say, oh, well, you know, I'm a democratic socialist. Like, no, she is an outright socialist. And if there's anyone that knows about the ground game and leading some type of a movement, it would be her.
This election year and the anger of millions against the war and the cost of living crisis has shown that there's a huge opening for a new party for working people, even if it is temporarily being set back by the great lie and the fear of Trump. There is still an important opening from now until November 5th to win hundreds of thousands of working class and young people to our movement and to the Jill Stein campaign. So let's campaign for that. For union members, if you're watching this either in person or on live stream, and you're a union member and you agree with our analysis, then please contact Workers Strike Back, because we need to put forward a number of rescind Harris endorsement resolutions in our union movement to start a real debate and challenge the labor leadership who are cheerleading Harris.
All right. And for the sake of time, because I do have, I know Eric's giving me cues in the background, for the sake of time, but you guys see where that's going. Kshama is a phenomenal speaker. Again, I encourage all of you to check out Workers Strike Back. They have their own website. So check out Workers Strike Back, and you can see if there are chapters in your area. Like I said, they do have quite a bit of them, and see how you can get involved. Okay. So we're going to show Jill Stein did give a speech as well during the Workers Strike Back protests at the DNC convention. Let's go ahead and jump into this.
Thank you so much, Kayla. And thank you so much to everyone here. Thank you not just for being here tonight, but thank you for all you do. Thank you for being that will change America and change the world. And those of you who are here, by the way, we are not alone, as you know that. Right now, on just one of these social media streaming sites, on Do Dissidents alone, there are 3,000 people who are with us right now. people so badly need to hear everything that was said here tonight. To know that the theater of the absurd going on right now in mainstream media covering the Democratic nominating convention, that is the theater of the absurd. We the people are locked out of that convention. We the people are having a real convention right here and right now and out in the streets. We hear nothing but genocide denial going on in that convention. That convention that's brought to us by AIPAC, by the war profiteers, by the healthcare insurance industry and big pharma and big real estate. That is who is funding politics in America and shaping the message at the DNC, shaping the agenda in Congress, shaping the agenda of the White House. And we say, enough of that. The American people are done being thrown under the bus.
Yep.
There is a moment of confusion going on right now, referred to as the Kamala mania. Many of us have seen this before. Anybody remember Obama mania? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We are not being fooled here.
That's right.
And America will not long be fooled. They can only be fooled right now because Kamala Harris has not had a single real interview with the press. She has not had a single debate, and in fact, she has not received a single vote. Kamala was anointed and appointed by the political elites and the economic elites in the Democratic Party. So this too will pass. The only question is when. It will be as soon as she's actually called to account, as soon as she actually begins to open her mouth, as she did, the first time that she was challenged at a rally, where she was challenged by some of the Palestinian protesters. And what did she say? Basically what she says, if you want Donald Trump elected, keep talking, otherwise I'm speaking. Boo.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she's going to be hearing a lot from we the people because we are speaking. All of us are speaking. So just to remember, Obama came into his election, he came into power claiming that he would end the war in Iraq. What did he do? He went from 2 wars to 7 wars. He ran saying he would close Guantanamo Bay. That exists till this day. He did not even begin to close it. He ran saying he would provide at least a public option and bulk purchasing of pharmaceuticals. They didn't do any such thing. They just continued to privatize healthcare and pour public subsidies into private profits through the Affordable Care Act. So we've been here before, and it's just shameful that people are being fooled, but it's not clear how much people are being fooled or how much they're just being intimidated and they're not showing up. We'll see. Yes, her polls are spiking, but her polls do not cover everybody. And in 2020, in the presidential election, 1 out of every 3 American voters voted with their feet by not participating in that election and not giving their votes to either Trump or Biden. Those are the people who are most being thrown under the bus. Those who don't vote are largely youth, people of color, people in low-income communities who are not voting, who are absolutely the first to be thrown under the bus, those who are getting hit worst and first. But that tide of abuse is really reaching all of us now as more and more Americans are struggling harder and harder. We know now that over 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, barely scraping by. We know that half of all Americans right now are paying 30 to 50% of their monthly income just to keep a roof over their heads and are just 1 or 2 paychecks away from being evicted. Evictions are skyrocketing. Rates of homelessness are at an absolutely unprecedented rate at the same time that the Supreme Court is making it illegal to be homeless, and you are at risk for being arrested simply for sleeping in the public, for lack of an actual place to put your head down and rest. So, you know, this is not happening around the margins. This is happening to all of us. And as our speakers addressed before, healthcare is a crisis for everyone right now. We're seeing 8 million Americans who were driven into poverty last year just from the cost of healthcare alone. 18 million Americans who were not able to afford their pharmaceuticals. Yet this was a promise made back in the time of Obama that they would adopt bulk purchasing and bring down the cost of pharmaceuticals. They still haven't done it, even though they are patting themselves on the back now for claiming what a great job they're doing of bringing down those costs for 10 pharmaceuticals, 10 out of absolutely thousands. You know, it's like AOC, who we fondly call AOC Pelosi. Mm-hmm. And I have to credit my newfound running mate, Butch Ware, for coming up with that one. What AOC said, was it last night? You know, just giving cover to Kamala. This pretense that the Democratic Party is working hard, the Biden-Harris administration, that they are working hard to achieve a ceasefire. In fact, while we were having our convention with abandoned Biden-Harris, someone in the press interrupted to say that, oh, good news, a ceasefire agreement had just been adopted. And we said, what? Oh, okay. Let's see what pans out, you know. And we've seen what pans out. You know, that was just another rumor, another misleading statement that AOC herself was parroting, pretending that there is some ceasefire agreement that is forever just an inch or two in front of our noses. But in fact, that ceasefire agreement is not coming. And in fact, the murder and the torture and the destruction of people and the civilization is increasing. It's not getting better, even as the Democrats are telling us that the ceasefire is around the corner. In fact, the number of deaths has gone up massively since the time when they first started promising. You know, and that number is now up to some 200,000 people. But who's counting?
Yep.
Because
this is why they don't want people like Jill Stein on the debate stage, because she's going to put Israel and Gaza will be a topic on the debate stage. I think we all realize this, because they know that she will push back on the lies that they're telling. This is why they don't want her on the debate stage. They don't want Claudia de la Cruz is a good debater. I watched her during the free and equal debates, which features its third party and independent candidates. And those debates are actually really good. There's another one in September. She's also a good debater. So the thing is that they don't want the American people to hear this. The reason why the Democratic Party did not have Dem debates when there were multiple candidates running against Joe Biden as a primary is because they didn't want the American people to see that there could have been better options than Joe Biden. Plus, none of those people were people that they selected. None of those people were people that they anointed. That's how this works. So the best thing that you can do is to get this information out to your friends and your family, because a lot of people don't even know who Jill Stein is. A lot of people don't even know that she's running. Everyone keeps talking about RFK. Most people I've spoken to don't know that RFK Jr. is running for president. So this is why they keep them out of the media and they keep them off the debate stage, because they don't want the American people to see that there are better options out there. They just want you to see those two choices, and that's it.
People are being pulverized right now. There are no bodies. Even when there's no rubble on top of them, you still cannot count the bodies. People who are losing relatives are being handed little plastic bags of basically pulverized bodies that are strewn on the floor. You know, this is like a commentary of who our government is, of how our tax dollars are being spent. To me, one of the really grimmest symbols, one of the truest symbols of what this policy is the fact that over 1,000 children, it was 1,000 months ago, over 1,000 children have had leg amputations with no anesthesia. I mean, that's like going back to incredible era of barbarism. During the Civil War, before there was anesthesia, that was the era of biting the bullet. Biting the bullet meant you were given a bullet to bite on while you were having amputations in the Civil War. And what's going on right now is like that level of barbarity being inflicted on children. So we say to anyone who's confused about who do they vote for and what do you vote for, to know that every vote for Kamala is an endorsement. It is an affirmation. It supports and it enables genocide. If you want to enable genocide, well, yeah, you've got your candidate in Kamala Harris. But if you want to stop genocide, voting for our campaign is how we do that.
100% there. And I think this is what people really need to hear, because the reality is a vote for Kamala or Donald Trump continues the genocide. Kamala Harris still has not publicly stated that she is willing to adopt an arms embargo to Israel, because she doesn't support it. Her campaign had to come forward and say it for her, even though she said something to those people privately that she is considering it. She's not considering it, or otherwise she wouldn't be there. Do you think the Democratic Party would have selected Kamala Harris to be the nominee if that's what she supported? Hell no. Do you think AIPAC would have given her money if that's what she supported? Hell no. AIPAC is retweeting Kamala Harris on Twitter. AIPAC is retweeting Kamala Harris on Twitter, fam. And I say this because I know a lot of you have told me on the call-in shows that you're not on Twitter. So I'm just letting you know, they're retweeting her, right? Just like they retweeted Bernie Sanders when he said Israel had a right to defend itself. These are the things that some people don't want to come to grips with, because I know they're afraid of Donald Trump. I mean, I look at it like this. I already had Donald Trump, so I'm not afraid of Donald Trump. I'm not afraid of no man. But the reality is both of these people will continue to give Israel arms. And it's not just about Gaza. Israel is bombing Lebanon right now. Again, Syria. They want to expand Israel. Netanyahu has not kept a secret. He's talked about it on the world stage. It's not a secret. And Blinken and all of them, they're all just playing this game, and they're just moving people around like different chess pieces. But they're all in on it. And that includes corporate media is in on it. People like Dana Bash, she's in on it when she talks about the alleged sexual assault on October 7th from Hamas, but she won't say anything about the sexual assault of the Palestinian people that are in the detention center. They're all in on it. There's a reason why you see certain people on CNN and MSNBC and Fox News. You would never see me on there. Let's all put two and two together. Don't you think it's a little strange that even people who are more popular than me, people that have bigger channels than me, people who are public figures, don't you think it's a little strange they won't bring those people on? But they'll bring on Charlemagne the God, who really does not know as much about politics and how it works. They want to keep the people dumb. They want you to think this is all you have. You have no other option. It's a problem.
And every vote, every single vote that's cast for our campaign is a shot across the bow of the empire, that we are organized and we are coming for them, they who are war criminals who actually belong in The Hague. We are getting organized. The American people already agree with us. That is why there is such a powerful disinformation and fear campaign that's going on right now 24/7 to silence us and to disappear us, because the empire is quaking in its boots, because the American people are done being thrown under the bus, and we are done tolerating a genocide, which is really the tip of the spear of empire. And this empire is not only impoverishing us, it is also endangering us. That empire is not limited to the outrages being committed in Gaza. That empire has conducted regime change about 80 times since the Second World War, basically strewing death and destruction across the world in its policies of endless war. Has this created a more secure or peaceful world? Hardly. What it's brought us is essentially failed states, mass refugee migrations, and continuing terrorist threats, one right after the other. You can go all the way back to the war in Vietnam. What did we accomplish in the war in Vietnam? You know, absolutely nothing. Vietnam was where I woke up as a teenager in high school. I woke up to what kind of a world we are living in and what our political system is. Whether it was Democrats or whether it was Republicans, it was all about killing people in Vietnam and taking our young people to die in Vietnam. And it was so clear to me that it was absolutely absurd, this political system. I wanted nothing to do with it until I discovered Ralph Nader in the year 2000 and discovered this. This is what democracy looks like. This is what people-powered and worker-powered democracy actually looks like. But just a few more words about that empire, because that empire, you know, it has a policy. It's called full spectrum dominance. That means that we, the USA, will dominate all countries, all potential areas of competition, all around the world, in all spheres of interaction, whether it is on the battlefield, whether it is under the sea, on the sea, in the oceans, in the skies, in cyberspace, in outer space. We, the US, will dominate all spheres. And that is what we have proceeded to do since the collapse of the Soviet Union, when we became the unopposed power. And we still think we are the unopposed power. We are not the unopposed power, and we need to get with the program soon and stop being the bully in the china shop. That is costing us, that is costing us half of our congressional budget, which works out to, I did check this number because it's not in common circulation, it's $12,000 on average per household that paid for the endless war machine last year. $12,000. Did you have something better you might have done with $12,000? That is the average contribution of each household to the endless war machine last year. That includes the VA, it includes nuclear power and weapons in the energy program, and so on. So it includes some of the things that aren't usually calculated in there. But remember,
just want to say this really quick as well. If you ever have the opportunity to live in another country, I think you should take that opportunity. I had that opportunity. And I will tell you, I think it's important for you to see how other people live in some of these other countries, even some of the countries that the US government tells you that you should avoid and they're bad people or their leaders are dictators or whatever. oftentimes that what you'll find is when you go to those countries, it's nothing like what they said it was. Nothing like what they said it was. And I think everyone should just have that experience so that you can understand what it is like to live somewhere else. And for some people, that can be difficult for them to grasp because they're like, well, no, this is America. Why would I want to go anywhere else? You know, I mean, just to see what else is out there. And I encourage people, especially if you are a high school senior and you want to attend college, I would encourage you to apply to colleges overseas, not just colleges in the US, especially if it's a country where the colleges there are free, even for Americans to attend. I encourage you to do that. You need to have different experiences so you can see it for yourself instead of just believing the propaganda and all the BS that's fed to you by corporate media and the State Department. You need to have those experiences. And I want you to see what that's like. I want people to see what it's like to live in a country where everybody has health care. I want people to see what it's like to live in a country where you can go to college for free. So you can see that these things can be done. But our government chooses to spend money in such ways that doesn't benefit the American people. And unless you're a billionaire or you come from nowadays, or you come from a family that already has wealth, and you have generational wealth because of that, you know, your experience in this country is probably going to be, for the most part, pretty positive. But when you talk to people, and I've spoken to people, when you talk to people who have grown up poor and still are poor, when you talk to people that are part of the working poor and they've been this way their whole life and they haven't had a chance to get out of poverty, then you start to see like what a lot of people in this country are facing. And you realize America, this whole idea of the American dream, it's not obtainable for a lot of people. Because the oligarchs, they control so much and they control the politicians. So the politicians ain't even on your side. How can they be on your side if the billionaires control them? How can they be on your side if you have like the Israeli lobby controlling them as well? So they're going to do whatever they can for Israel, but they're not willing to do what they can for you. And more people need to call this out. It doesn't make any damn sense. Why would you be supporting politicians that are going to say that Israel needs to be first? That doesn't make any sense. I don't hear people in Germany saying that France needs to be first. We need to think about these things and think about what you're really voting for when you really do vote. And you need to think about your congressmen. Some people just vote straight down ballot. They don't even look at, oh, who is this person? What kind of policies? What have they approved? When legislation comes through, what have they voted for? What have they voted against? A lot of times people just go straight down ballot, don't even look. Don't look into the politicians because a lot of people just don't have time to do it. So there's that as well. We're going to finish up a little bit more here with Jill, and then I think they said Michelle Obama's coming on.
It is half of our congressional dollars that are going into this endless war machine. And it not only impoverishes us and prevents us from spending what we need on healthcare and housing and education and making public higher education free and building at least 15 million units of public housing, good quality social housing. That is what we need.
Let's go ahead and pause here. And another thing I want to tell you too, to expand on what Jill just said there, when we talk about money that is spent elsewhere and not here in the United States, I want to remind you what MLK said about the Vietnam War. The money that is spent for wars abroad affects domestic policy and issues here at home, because that is money that is not spent here at home. All this money that's going into the military industrial complex, that's money that's not spent here so that you can have universal health care. We always have to make the connection. Sometimes people don't want to deal with foreign policy, but you do have to understand that the money that is spent over there, that's money that's not being spent here. Our government sends $3.8 billion a year to Israel every year. And in Israel, they have free healthcare for everybody, and they have universal, free college for everybody. But we don't have that here. That is a problem, ladies and gentlemen, and more Americans need to be more outraged by that, but they're not, because they're so caught up in the antics. They're too busy dancing around talking about we got coconuts falling out of the damn tree. They're too busy dancing around and they're like, oh, Kamala's got a Beyonce song. They want you to remain dumb. They want you to fall for the okie doke. That just saw what took the break. They sent out Little John. So they bring out Little John and Meg the Stallion and got you dancing around and clapping and all that stuff. And you're not even asking yourself, what is this person's policies? What is their platform? Wait a minute. Nobody voted for her in the Democratic primary. How is it that this person was just selected out of nowhere? This is distraction, people. They distract you by putting entertainers in front of you. And particularly when they go to talk to Black people, they do this a lot. Because I don't care. You go to Atlanta, Kamala goes to Atlanta to speak to obviously a place that has a large Black population. You go to Atlanta and you bring in Meg the Stallion and have her shaking her ass in front of the people to get the people in the seats. Some of the people left after Meg the Stallion performed, okay? They just came there for Meg. When you go to other communities, you don't do that. When you go to areas that are predominantly white, you don't bring Meg the Stallion to New Hampshire. When you go to talk to Asian American communities, Kamala Harris isn't bringing BTS to come and perform for Asian Americans. They pander that way to us. And this kills me. And people like Roland Martin and all of them, they're all fall for it because they're all getting paid to do it. They're all in on it.